Everyone, and welcome back to Geopolitics with Tyberius D. I've got one of the fan favorite requests back. Today we're going to be talking with Colonel Dan Steiner about Ukraine. This is going to be a really good one. And we've got Samantha kind of rolling back there in the background. She's going to be supporting me a little bit. Basically, long story short, is that the girlfriend helped me get a little overly intoxicated earlier. Thanks, babe. So I'm a little off of my rocker for this one, unfortunately. But we're going to be talking about Ukraine today. We're going to be talking about what is going on, because about 30 hours ago, we got word that Russia had formally recognized the separatist states within Ukraine, and we're moving Russian units into the region, which is, kind of a misnomer. But anyway, roll that wonderful intro, and we'll bring you up to speed. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so I gave a little synopsis here, but I always love just to hear Colonel Dan talk, and so do you guys. So Dan, give us your personal highlight reel of, let's just say, the last week. Where did we start and where did we end up?
That's probably a question the White House is asking themselves right as we speak. But
God damn.
um, quite honestly, what we encountered in the last 24 hours, uh, you've been around enough military people, you've heard enough military acronyms and enough military truisms that the one truism that absolutely came true in the last 24 hours is no plan survives contact with the enemy. Well, in this case, the Russian plan probably did survive contact with him, but ours sure the hell didn't. And we have an issue, and we can get into that in a little while. We have an issue on truly understanding just how much unity is there amongst the Ukrainian forces. What's the infiltration ratio the Russians have had inside that process? Understanding they've had 7 years to infiltrate it. So I think we have a lot of unknowns, but if you want to jump back 7 days ago, black and white, 7 days ago, we had all the intelligence we needed from the IC, the intelligence community, to make a recommendation to the President of the United States that an invasion of some level was imminent on the Ukraine. Probably the second part of that briefing, once that statement was made, is typically the president or his national security advisor, someone would say either, "Oh, I've seen the proof you've just shown me. So what do you think they're going to do? Right? Is it full scale? Is it half scale? Is it Donbass? Is it unconventional warfare? What is it? What is it you're anticipating?" And the drumbeat continued throughout the week of all the indications are, because of things that were dispersed and what types of things were dispersed and what the readiness status was of those things, that it was going to be a rather large-scale event. Now, you can type sequence those events. Just because everybody's up on the board and ready to go doesn't mean everybody goes at one time. It's not like charge of the light brigade. You can do one thing and then have a timeline in your plan that, depending on the outcome of your first step, you make a decision within X amount of hours to do step 2, and then you just sequentially keep going. And you can slide this force in there in increments over a period of days if you wanted to, if that's the way you put the plan together. But we were fairly confident in the last 7 days. We were very confident that this was coming. All this talk about the Ukrainian leadership, Zelensky saying, "Hey, stop scaring my people," blah 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 blah. I will tell you quite honestly, most of the opinions became Zelensky and his staff needed time. And I'm sure we probably figured this out after we talked to them further. Um, if they were doing preparatory things, if they had had a plan to defend themselves, and at the last minute, based upon the intelligence we gave them, his military leader said, "Hey, let's change this plan." Excuse me. He needed time to do that, and that may have been what he was asking for. There's a lot of there's a lot of people out there that believe that is probably true, that the Ukrainians at the last minute had to change their strategic decisions on, once fighting started with the Russians, how should they handle that fighting. And that would, the less professional your force, the longer that takes. And remember, Tiberius, we've talked about this before. You got an entire population of crazy eddies over there. You got 16 to 17,000 declared foreign nationals that have come there for all kinds of reasons, but they're there. Their disciplinary levels, their ability to do things that they, in a sequential manner, in a tactical environment, who knows? You've got from Billy Joe Bob, who spent 5 months worth of pay at the Army surplus store, to the guy that was ex-Australian Special Forces that works for an NGO that's over there. So you've got this hodgepodge of people. So if the Ukrainians had to change tactics, strategic tactics at the last minute, they needed time to do that, and they may still not be ready. One of the arguments we had this afternoon, and I didn't disagree with it, is that you haven't seen the Ukrainians draw a line in the sand with the Russians yet, even though they're moving into the larger territories of Donbass in general, which I think the consensus is now is phase one, they're going to take the entire Donbass region. They're going to force the Ukrainians to shoot at it. I will tell you, by 6 o'clock this evening, my time, there was a report out there that there had been about 2,000 indirect fire rounds fired today. And there were other people saying, no, that's probably low. It's probably a lot more than that, because some of the people that count rounds don't know how to count them. They don't differentiate between a report and an impact. But I don't know the Russians are trying to goat them yet. But I do believe we ran into an incident this week, in this last 7 days, where the Ukrainians have tried to figure out a change in plans. And, traditionally, historically, that's dangerous. Change your plan after contact with the enemy, but to change your plan before contact with the enemy, that's a different philosophy. And to some Russian commanders, that probably spells panic, that there's enough panic there that no one really wants to engage what the Russians had pulling into the Donbass region right now, the Donbass in general. Remember, Tyberius, we need to quit talking about the Western declared areas of breakaway, whatever you want to call them, the acronyms anybody wants to call them. But the two regions claim a much larger piece of property, which is practically all of Donbass. And that's where the Russians seem to be moving into. And as a matter of fact, the Russians came out later on this afternoon and basically said, that's what we're going to do. We've been asked to do that. We're going to do that. So I think I think Ukraine got caught off guard, is the short version.
Mm-hmm. So I want like one clarification that's a little bit more on the nerdy side. But so there was about half of the Donetsk and Luhansk provinces within Ukraine were part of the Russian, or basically were occupied by Russian separatist forces. And those were the People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. And they basically said that they had control over this, small area. But they're also greater provinces of those, respectively, within Ukraine itself. Now, are you saying that it looks like the Russians are actually occupying the full and totality of both of those provinces?
Yeah, I think that's almost a given now, Tiberius. The Russians indirectly have said it. Some of the Russian, the rest of the staff, I think they played their hand. The other thing, remember, um, what the IC sees and what gets cleared to be talked about, and two entirely different things. I know we have lived off this commercial satellite imagery thing. It's sexy, the newspapers or the news networks, they can sell a lot of commercial airtime with sexy little satellite imageries that basically tell you at some point in time there was something parked somewhere, is what it really tells you if you don't integrate it with all the other intelligence. But yeah, I do. I think the Donbass region in general is now, if you can't get the Ukrainians, if they can't get the Ukrainians to fight them over the Donbass region in general, then to the Ukrainian people, they're probably they're losing the fight anyway. They haven't fired a round in retaliation openly against the Russians, and they've given up a territory that's now 2 times the size of the rebel-held areas. So they're in a hard spot, and we know they're in a hard spot. We may be desperately trying to figure out, here's our recommendation, and we do this. We send experts and we say, look, here's the recommendation. The Ukrainian general that's known a U.S. general for, since they were lieutenant colonels or majors together, they get together and they talk and they say, hey, what's the deal? I'll get you on my network. It's secured. Tell me what the deal is. And then he'll say, look, we're not going to fight them in the declared independent territories, but we are getting ready to fight them in the Donbass region. Well, the two things have to happen. They've got to be prepared to do that. And so do the Russians. And if the Russians are still maneuvering and the Ukrainians are trying to re-maneuver right now, then you've had this quasi-quiet period, I guess, today. The other thing I'll tell you is Moscow is doing a very clever job. This is still an information campaign for them. The information warfare to them in this plan has been very well thought out, and it's mostly directed towards the Russian people, not externally to U.S. population or the population of Europe. But it takes time if you're going to do things correctly. The Russians have to vote on and authorize what Putin said he needed to do. They got to make it look like it's all official. And so the paper trail of what took place yesterday, it's an issue for the Russians right now. Now they're still moving. They're probably driving towards contact. It would be interesting to see in the airspace over the area they're in right now, who's flying next to who. Are we at 83,000 feet looking down, and they're at 1,500 feet looking for Ukrainian rebels? It's interesting airspace right now where this is all taking place. And we always talk about this. You run a real risk of a mistake when you get deconflicted airspace. Needless to say, the intelligence community does not pay attention to the no-dams that go out. The thing that Twisted Aviator and I were talking about this morning.
But before you go there,
doesn't really apply to the intelligence agencies.
So yeah, I actually kind of want to ask you about that. Has there been any formal notice of like the Russian government or any government saying, "Hey, this is now a no-fly zone. Get the hell out"?
Well, from what Cyber pulled up and banned it, and I think Twisted found it too. I think there's been some that are up. I remember a few that were up like a month and a half ago. And it seems like there are a couple that are extended. There's a couple that have been put in place by nation states like France and Italy and a couple others. Hey, if you belong to us, don't fly in this part of the country. Nobody was doing it anyway. If you were flying anywhere in our Donbass, you were up to something. You were absolutely up to something. But that's hot airspace right now. And Twisted could probably make a comment about that being an aviator, but that's pretty hot airspace right now. If you're cruising around on that thing, you're probably getting pinged really hard. And again, we go back into this, mistakes can be made.
If we need to bring Twisted in there, he is in the chats, and I'm sure he would happily jump in if you want to request that. That's probably specifically an airspace conversation, which we might open up later. So I want to move on a little bit more so we've recapped where we're at, and now we're talking about like what's going on in the last 48 hours. Was there any signal for you that the people missed, like that no one was talking about, where it's like they're gonna go? Because even this one took me a little bit by surprise. Like the timing seems a little off, and I didn't pick up anything on why this is exactly happening now.
Complex war plans, one that I truly believe the Russians have developed probably for the last 15 years. Putin warned of this event in 2007 at the Munich speech, the one we watched the other day in the stream. If you've got a plan that has been in the development stage, review stage, exercise stage, back in April when we heard about all these big exercises were going on, and even in the last couple of weeks, when you've heard about this, well, they're doing exercises. Did you ever hear anybody on the U.S. side of this conversation, all these experts that are out there, did you ever hear anybody come up and say, what plan are they exercising against? If you're doing a force-on-force scheme of maneuver for a defensive operation such as Belarus or whatever, or you're exercising down there just east of the Donbass region, what is your exercise based on? We just don't go to exercises and just say, okay, we're here, all the Tories are here. Okay, you shoot at me, I'll shoot at you, and we're going to call it an exercise. It doesn't work that way. If you've put an exercise plan together, the only reason you do a large-scale force-on-force exercise is to practice a plan. What was Defender Europe this summer? The largest review of a NATO-led defensive operation of Europe. So it was based upon a plan. There's a plan out there. In the Middle East, back in the Cold War days, we had the plan 5,000. We had the plan 2,000 for year. We had all these plans. It is puzzling to me when you ask, did anybody miss anything? Why did we never ask the question? Why didn't somebody ask, super smart Jake Sullivan, what plan are they executing against? Well, I'll refer you to Pentagon. Okay. Secretary Austin, what plan are they executing against? And then you notice, Tiberius, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, these rumors came up about, the CIA intercepted a plan.
I missed that one actually, but
yeah, this rumor floated out there. Yeah, they actually intercepted a plan. That's why we're so sure what's going to happen. Okay, let me get my hands on a plan. Let me see how you just ran your training exercise, and I'll figure out if you were preparing for something. But we never asked that question. And the American people deserve to hear the right questions asked, and that's what aggravates me. The media wants to chase bullets, tanks, missiles. They want to interview people that can tell you all the they want to ask the right questions. If they did a massive exercise, what plan were they executing against? But nobody asked it. So to me, that's the question that people missed.
all right, fair enough. I definitely get where you're going with that. Sorry. I'm a little off the train of thought because on one level, I get exactly where you're going with that in the regards that, all this stuff is planned out. Usually, a full operation of battalion level takes 18 months to plan at minimum, starting scratch. So, for me,
yeah. Well, regional war plans never stop. The minute you close the cycle, and you do the exercise loop, the staff immediately goes into the modification process of the plan. So major plans, theater plans, and this is absolutely a theater plan for the Russians. This plan never stops. It's a living document. It changes constantly until the next training cycle comes up, and then you either piecemeal units out to the training. Look, in the theater plan, you 5 units have this task. So you go to this training area and you conduct readiness evaluations on those tasks. You units, you go do this. This is why you see the Navy going out, while the Air Force is going out, why the missiles are going out. And everybody has their piece of the pie that executes the plan. The plan itself is tabletop with senior leaders. Mm-hmm. This is the general officer with the smart 06s who actually wrote the damn thing, sitting there in the room saying, okay, this is how this would unfold. This is what NATO would bring to the game. This is what our options would be. But the process itself never starts. If he put them on this process in 2007, when he gave this probably his most emotional speech up until the one yesterday, then this thing's been a living document with a living process for 15 years.
All right, interesting. Um, so usually with the plan, the original question that I had for you, and that I kind of want to drill back down into real quick is usually with a plan is that you have a trigger condition, right? Is that at certain places that you know you're going to move from this phase to that phase.
Right.
And the thing I'm trying to figure out, like that I can't get over, is what was the trigger condition for or for legitimizing the separatist regions? Like that's the thing I'm still personally trapped up on. I can't figure out what it was. Like what changed?
So especially in something as large as this is, again, we're going to talk about a theater level plan. You typically have a list of items that are prioritized of, okay, if these things are green, we can do this. If these things are yellow, we can do this, but we have to extract that. And so a good theater plan, and the Russians write great theater plans. They're just as professional in plan writing as we ever have been. We get too many outside strap hangers in our planning process, by the way. We get NGOs, we get, the MIC comes in, we get the State Department, we Treasury, Commerce, I mean, Teletubbies. It just, you really got to kind of hide from like 90% of the planning team that says they want to show up. The Russians don't have all that shit. They lock away a planning team and they say, here's your job. But if you have indicators that allow leadership to say, okay, we could do this part right now, wait for the other indicators, and then do the next phase. The whole issue of phases of an operation: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. I truly, I would be stunned if the Russians didn't approach this way. If the Russians didn't say, yeah, we can wait till all the indicators are there and then we'll just roll. We'll roll over the Ukraine. Or the boss changes his mind, something changes in the political environment, and you say, do we have the indicators to at least start phase 1 with the Donbass? Yes, sir, we do. Okay, let's do it. And typically that's how that rolls.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. She's got her sound feeding through. Anyway, so I 100% get that. And thank you for sharing, because I'm not in the particular details of military planning. My real question would be next is just to close out the planning conversation here. Do you think this is the plan that started with, or maybe the invasion of Georgia back in '08, or is this a plan that is more Ukrainian specific that started probably we saw engaged in 14?
Right. Yep. And I think you and I talked about this before. The Russians thought they were well underway. I mean, they had from 94 to 2008 to think that they had actually started a modern day conversion of a ground combined air sea fighting force. Smaller than the Red Army, more potent, more mobile, more lethal in the long run. Quite possibly, they executed part of that process in Georgia to see if this force could really do what their conversion people told them it can do, and it didn't. Georgia was a tremendous failure for the Russians trying to convince themselves that they had stepped into the 21st century of a very complicated battlefield. One of the reasons we really knew that is because although they had cyber operations, they were terrible. I mean, we had 14-year-olds with 5-year-old computers that could do better than they did in some of their cyber operations. So yeah, when 14 rolled around and our Western NGOs cooked up this, let's just call it what it is, a false flag colored revolution in Kiev. Again, they said, okay, you guys, Putin's sitting there going, you guys tanked this last time. We're going to try this again. We're going to take the Crimea. We need the Crimea because somewhere down the road, we're going to do our theater plan. And if it's in 2022, so be it. But we down the road, there's certain things we need, and Crimea would have been one of them. Crimea was also kind of a message to the Turks, by the way, by that time in 2014, 15. There was some animosity between the Turks and the Russians over the mass migration event that the Russians created
In Syria.
to try and destabilize Europe. And I think really Putin changed his mind about his long-term relationship with Erdogan after that. But it's fluid if you have a well-done plan and you're training. I mean, what was Syria? You and I've said this to you before. Syria was an exercise for the Russian military to do things in a 21st century battle environment. Can I send units into Syria and navigate my way around the U.S.'s top-of-the-line radars? Can I get my stuff to deny the top-of-the-line stuff that's coming from the IDF every night when they beat the hell out of Damascus or wherever else? So the Russians, again, gave themselves a testing ground. In a lot of ways, our testing grounds was Afghanistan and Iraq, to some degree in Syria. But the Syria thing became more touchy because you were too contact close with the Russians. I mean, once we killed the event where we killed like 200 to 300 Russian little green men, Russians that had their discharge papers, kind of like the way we do business. I think the general consensus is in D.C. is this can get out of control, and the public was just sick of it. They didn't want to transfer from Iraq to Afghanistan and from Afghanistan to Syria, and the sentiment was we're not doing that, and the stakes were high because we were close to each other. So we let the Israelis do it. Hey, you test our stuff in Syria because we don't want to test it in Syria. So yeah, they've gone through a series of events that is trying to convince them that on a modern day battlefield in Europe, if they have to push that infamous 14 nation mustard colored map back to the West, do they have the capability to do it? Because nobody's going to take it to a nuclear environment. Mutual destruction is still like, people may not read the doctrine, but it still exists. But can they do it? Can they conventionally push the mustard states back? If they can't do it conventionally, then they can't go. But he talks now, especially yesterday, he talks like he believes he can go. He can do it. He has the capability, and more importantly, he has the resolve to do it. And that makes this far more dangerous than just a Ukrainian issue.
I agree with this. The problem is that I need to bring some of this stuff up real quick. I don't have your mustard map off the top of my off of my files, but I do want to show the audience two things. The first one is this particular map that we were talking about earlier, where we were talking about the Donbass region and Ukraine as a whole. And this map is exactly what it is. There is about half of these regions were controlled by the separatists, and then the other half of the region was largely still pro-Ukrainian and controlled. But now it looks like the entire provinces of both are now currently are in the process of being occupied by the Russians, which is quite significant. So I'm going to minimize that out. And then the second part is that Dan's mustard color map. If you're not familiar with it, this is on his particular show, but this is basically a breakdown. This is basically a breakdown of the NATO states that joined post-1994. And Dan can probably give you a lot of details regarding this. My original theory of the Putin battle plan actually does come from Dan, so I'm going to let him explain it. What is Putin's major grievance, and what is their actual inevitable plan here? What are they trying to get to?
One of the mistakes you can make strategically, one of the things they'll teach future senior leaders in the War College is you cannot position yourself for an adversary, or even worse, a potential future adversary, based upon simply the personalities of the person in the current. You have to look at the past. You have to look at the potential for the future of whoever this is that you're talking about. In our circumstance, it continues to astound me. And I know what I'm glad you brought this up, because I'm going to talk about this in the morning. it continues to astound me that everything we do, everything we say about the Russians now is Putin, 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 Putin. You know, it's the same approach we took with Iraq. You know, Saddam's bad, Iraqi people good. We got rid of the Ba'ath Party. Whoops, we pissed off the Iraqi people and we stepped into a landmine. You know, we go to Afghanistan, Taliban bad, Al Qaeda bad. And we identify, I remember, oh my gosh, I used to carry around the cards, Ace of Spades, Jack of Diamonds, whatever else. That's a strategic error when you do that. You have to look at potential adversaries or current adversaries holistically. What are their capabilities? What is the national sentiment of their population? Remember about a month ago, you and I were talking about, are the Russian people really behind Putin on this? Are they not? Are they not for it? Are they indifferent to it? There's so many other factors that have to go into a modern day military nation to determine what is the right course of action for what we're doing. And we are classically not doing that. We're 0 for 3. We didn't do it in Iraq. I will tell you, before I went to CENTCOM's, the planning team, before I went to Camp Doha and sat down with Arcent and the Fifth Army guys, I spent a lot of time over there. I'd spent time over there. Hell, half of us were there when 9/11 kicked off. And I will tell you unequivocally that every single Arab ally, potential ally, neutral party, businessman, paper boy, you know, shisha pipe, coffee man, every one of them would tell us that we're tactically in the field, do not destroy the Ba'ath Party. But because we planned so myopically, and I was there when we did this plan, we planned so myopically, it didn't work. And so I guess my statement to you would be, if we're trying to figure out what the Russians want to do about the 14-nation map, the mustard map as I call it, the expansion into Eastern Europe by NATO operations, we need to understand Russian history. You know, we were listening to Putin today, excuse me, and Neil, his first 35 minutes was a history lesson on Russia and the Ukraine. Absolutely no cue cards, not reading off a teleprompter, didn't have some pimple-faced kid from Georgetown University writing a speech for him. He just spoke because he is a subject matter expert on his nation. He is. The guy's an oracle on Russian history, always has been. And so when he was speaking today, he was telling you, just out in the open, for the first time since 2007, he said, we collectively, because of our past, we cannot accept the fact that you want to take the Ukraine and move it into the Western camp. We can't accept that. We can't accept the 14 nations that are now up against our border being members of NATO. We couldn't resist it when it was taking place because we were military in ruins, you know, after the fall of the Soviet Union, but we never agreed with it. We lived with it. It's 2022 and we don't want to live with it anymore. And we had the resolve to tell you, you have to change it. So changing it is up to us. If we come to the table consistently, as this gets worse with the Russians, if they just whack the Ukraine, if we continue to come to the table with an attitude of, there is no way in hell, by God, we're ever going to allow those 14 nations to not be protected by NATO, then turn right back around, look at your population and say, we may be going to war. You have to do that, because if you're going to take a line, if you're just going to draw a line in the sand and say, by hook or by crook, I'm not moving. You know, look at World War II, Tyberius. Once we were knee deep in the war, what was the only alternative we were looking for? Victory.
Unconditional surrender.
Back to Potsdam or something in 1943, suddenly draw some compromise. Victory was the only thing we wanted. Victory was the only thing we wanted against the Japanese. because we had the resolve to say that. If the Russians don't believe we have that resolve, and I believe they do not believe that we have that resolve, I believe NATO believes we don't have that resolve, then their plan is the dominant plan right now.
All right. Yeah. Sorry. I largely have to agree with that. I do. I do stress a level of caution, and I know this is probably one of our bigger disagreements on how motivated the Russians are, and that's a macro level breakdown, right? Because leadership, sometimes I question the oligarchs on the more civilian side. Obviously, the Russian people are largely expendable to this government. They care about maintaining the state, this more autocratic state. And then you also have the enlisted corps that are going to be the boots on the ground here. Yeah, taking on Ukraine, yeah, they're 100% okay with that. Like, most of them think they're going to go home. Do they feel the same way about a NATO confrontation? So there's a lot of questions that I don't necessarily feel so gung-ho about, but that's the real issue here.
If you look at the verbiage of Roosevelt, when we made the commitment to Europe, not Pearl Harbor, when we made the commitment to Europe, when you look at the verbiage that Roosevelt spoke of when he addressed Congress, when he talked to his friends, I was fascinated by this in the War College, all the archive notes. He virtually had no one outside the Beltway of D.C. I mean, he didn't have anybody in Kansas. He didn't have anybody in Oklahoma. He didn't have anybody out there. It's like, yeah, buddy, let's go. Let's get in there and help kick those Nazis' ass. The war movement was not a war movement.
Right.
Hollywood painted that way with our little black and white movies, the 2-minute updates on the news media that we kept showing in all movie theaters. Great propaganda. But there was no public sentiment in the United States to enter the war. None. Japan was different. They attacked Pearl Harbor. That was an emotional event. But the Germans had not attacked us, and we were making money off the Germans. Roosevelt dug us out of the Depression, selling raw materials to the Germans, the Nazis, and the Japanese. So fast forward to 2022. The Russians are sitting there, and they have a leader that says, I've got no wiggle room. I've got no other piece of property I can give you. And I believe that Ukraine belongs to us. Hell, back in the Cold War, a third of our nuclear targeting was in Ukraine because of what the Russians had there.
Mm-hmm.
I have nowhere to go. We have nowhere to go. My generals say we have nowhere to go. And yet you keep coming east saying that everybody's entitled to do what they want to do because there are sovereign nations. Well, that sovereign nation speech really doesn't apply to Central and South America. That's we talk out of both sides of our mouth, and that's what we talk out of both sides of our mouth. And we just hope the public's too stupid to see it. But I believe, Tiberius, I believe after watching him today, after watching that 58-minute speech, I know this dude. And I know guys that know him better than me, and I'm like, that's a new him. That is a different person. That's the version of Roosevelt after Pearl Harbor. The Roosevelt that talked about finally getting into the war in Europe, that was a bomb. I mean, the reason nobody studies that in college is because, hell, does anybody know about it? When his staff was coming to him saying, look, if we don't do something, England's going to fall. England will fall. And then if we have to reinvade Europe, where the hell do we reinvade from? Iceland? Do we go down to, Diego Garcia? What the hell do we do? If we lose that toehold, I mean, what was England during the build-up for D-Day? It was a military base. 700 airfields. England was a staging area. If we would have lost the staging area, and I know for a fact that once they convinced him that the possibility of actually losing England, or England getting somebody like Chamberlain back into power and kicking Churchill out, that finest hour moment for him, and saying, hey, let's go back to, you name the city, and let's try and figure out how to stop this for a while. We lost England. We have no launching pad. If we had to launch from the East Coast, 3 more years. 3 more years before we would have had the gray holes and the command of the seas from the U-boats to get everything moving that way. Can you imagine taking the D-Day force
To
in
England.
the East Coast and moving it directly to Europe? Resolve. The issue that we talk about with the Russians right now is resolve. If this guy's willing to sit in front of us in a tone of voice that I've never seen with him before, and I've been on this guy for 20 years, and his basic statement is, we can't accept this. You need to continue to talk to us. We need ironclad assurances. We can't accept this. And if you tell him, well, then, tough, because we're not budging on it, who has the resolve to fight? You or them? I don't think there's resolve in this country for crap to go back into Europe for the third time in 110 years. I don't believe it at all. I don't know. Advantage Putin right now. Advantage Putin. Very complex plan, very methodical, has really backed off the diplomacy side of this thing in the last 24 hours. Now he's in a very methodical mode. And at some point in time, this mode becomes, hey, put up or shut up. Unstrap that log, that hog if you want a gunfight or not, but do something. Secretary of State saying, I'm not going to go see Lavrov Thursday. I'm sure Lavrov cried for a half hour.
Oh my God.
Let's be serious about it. It's a very deliberate plan. It will deviate. They have the ability. They're sophisticated enough they can deviate. They can do phases. They could extend the consistent incursions into Ukraine as long as they want. I don't think they will. Not because of the readiness status of his other forces that are in this environment. That's a pain in the ass to stay in that type of readiness status. It's a real pain in the ass. It's expensive. You start running into phase maintenance issues on your bigger stuff, your track stuff, your rotor wing stuff, your aircraft, your missilery. You start having to really increase your logistical legs up front because you have a whole bunch of stuff that's been locked and cocked and ready to rock for 30, 60 days. And now it needs maintenance. You get that indicator light. Hey, tank gunnery, automatic aim is marginal. It's down to 60%. The gas and the gyros isn't there anymore. We used all the gas for the gyro. There's just so many things in the nuts and bolts category that can take place that when you stick a operation up on the line and put it in a combat mode, traditionally they go into combat. Desert Storm. We stayed in garrison until a week and a half before the war started. The 82nd and 101st did not move out until week and a half, 2 weeks before the actual war went underway with air power. 1:30 in the morning, Here they came out of Daharan. They flew over us, and it was like a Martian invasion. There were so many damn aircraft going over our head. This is difficult for them. I don't think they have a 30, 60, 90-day timeline. I think they can get in country and then do that. The other thing I think, Tyberius, is interesting. I think this makes a great conversation. Once you start to punish an adversary non-kinetically, like more sanctions today, more sanctions, and then the intelligence agent comes in and goes, "Hey, sir, there's a cash transfer taking place right now between the Chinese and the Russians on a Chinese network, and it's to the tune of about $50 billion. And so whatever bills, like, hey, you're not paying bills. If they've got what they believe is a workaround, then what are you putting up against them? How are you deterring them? That's one of my questions is, once you slap a guy, it's like a bar fight. You punch the hell out of a guy, he turns his head and looks back at you. Now what? What do you give him your best shot and he smiles. What do you do?
All right. So I've got a few notes here. One, just because I want to nerd out, is that there is one of the biographers for FDR, because I'm going all the way back there, said that the day that Roosevelt changed was September 1st, 1939. because Roosevelt became a different president that day because he knew war was coming. And you can see it, actually. In late 39, he starts getting together with captains of industry, which he despises, right? This is the FDR that put in the New Deal and like an 80% tax rates on corporations. He's now asking, car makers to make guns. He changes very radically that day. And I just wanted to hit that. I mean, this is the guy who passes Lend-Lease, right? Long story short, things changed. The second thing I want to hit is that more succinctly, logistics is a very interesting thing, and I want to kind of break down this a little bit more. The United States in NATO is within Eastern Europe, but we don't really have any forces in Ukraine. Number one, we were talking about this earlier, you and me, although we didn't do it live, unfortunately, was that the United States was mobilizing elements of the 18th Airborne Corps. Is that going to do anything without being in Ukraine? Because if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, I want to give you guys some order of battle information about some of the forces that we're looking at. And I'm going to give you guys the Russians first. This is a little old, and it's not everything that's in theater, but this is the kind of shit that we're talking about. The area is based around Rostov, and it is the 49th Combined Arms Army, is what the Russians call it, right? It has a full motorized rifle division. This is what we in the United States would call a mechanized division. These are two full brigades of mechanized forces along with an armored brigade. That's usually what makes up a mechanized division. And then, of course, you've got auxiliary units that go in to support this army. You've got numerous brigades of recon and motorized infantry regiments. You have two full Spetsnaz brigades, along with other MLRS, missile, and artillery brigades. Like, this is a lot of
They were my
hardware.
arch nemesis.
Really?
Yep. For a place called Vila, Denmark.
I don't know much about that, but my third
Don't
note.
want to.
Okay, fair enough. Excuse me, I cannot talk right now. The other thing I actually was going to ask you about, or before I get to the point, thank you for the raid, CSP. I am so sorry, I cannot talk. The other thing I actually wanted to ask you is a personal story. I love how you were there for Desert Storm, because I wasn't even born yet. God. Believe it or not, right? But I hear that was one hell of a show. You got to see the United States actually show what it could do after the reforms of Vietnam. We went in, we kicked ass and took names. And I guess everyone forgets about Grenada, but Panama, excuse me.
Grenada too. We had to fly some Russian engineers home, but they weren't Cubans, they were Russian, but yeah, that's history.
Anyway, so getting back to where we are with the logistics part, though, is that I was talking about the order of battle here. And if some people don't know what I'm saying here, is that this is an army just in the general area of the lower Donbass. And we haven't even talked about the other stuff that's around is it Kharkov? Kursk, excuse me.
Kharkov.
Yeah.
You're close.
Yeah.
You're liquor close.
Okay, so you've got the 49th Army operates out of Rostov and near Kharkov, and then the 16th Army operates out of Kursk, which was the big tank battle during World War II, and that's on the Russian side of the border. And I don't even know what's in Belarus right now, and I would believe that it's a whole nother army level organization. We're talking about these organizations are each 40,000 man a pop. Combatants. And if you want to break that down for me, you can. What do we have in the region? Because from what I understand, we're talking about 18th Corps. That's, 30,000 men fully loaded?
Oh, more than that.
You've got...
Yeah,
18th Airborne Corps rolls 3rd Infantry, all of 3rd Infantry Division, 10th Mountain, 82nd Airborne, 101st Airborne, 3rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command Brigade, 7th Transportation Brigade, 16th MP Airborne.
Son of a bitch, it's an army.
20th Engineer Brigade, 35th or 36th Signal Brigade, one of those two. I think 35th, 44th Medical Brigade, 525th Military Intelligence Brigade. They're literally what was their nickname? The Contingency Corps. Contingency Corps, basically, they're the contingency corps in the Army.
We moved the Corps en masse for Desert Storm. We moved 18th Airborne Corps en masse for Desert Storm, and it's the first time I ever drove by 600 rotor wings in my life. I thought driving by 150 A-10s was impressive, but driving by 600 rotor wings was pretty impressive. But the thing you got to remember about force structure, especially in orders of battle, orders of battle will be written for the generic starting point of what you do. You have round out units, round up units. You can plug and play. Hell, I've answered tip fids for deployments and change the structure. I used to have to go back to force command and change the structure. Hey, I don't want to take 6 of these. I want to take 2 of those. I understand what you tell me. I read the op order. I see what you want me to do. I need 3 of these and not 2 of those. And so we are a very, very good force integrated plug and play military. I'm not quite so sure how good the Russians are at that. They're far better than they used to be. But again, if we're talking about a theater level plan, for the Russians, a theater level plan is a minimum of 4 corps when they doctrinally start doing their work. So, if you go to Moscow and you go into their planning room, their J35, and you sit down and you start saying, "Hey, for shits and giggles, what do you guys really have on the hook for this?" It's probably about 230,000 that's actually on the hook. Now, does that hook get pulled up? Does that hook go into alert status? Does it go into be prepared to status? Does it forwardly deploy to a jump point? That all depends on the environment that the combatant commanders up front encounter. Once they gather what they think they're going to encounter, they can mix or play. You could see these armies, these Russian armies, ebb and flow, size, structure, and capabilities constantly. Because especially once they're underway, contact with enemy plans change. Here's the funny one, Tyberius. Here's one that that comes to the point I'm making here. The Russians made a big thing out of pulling a tank unit back last week. Remember we've started some withdrawals and we didn't believe it. And they had these videos that were for internal consumption in Russia, not for external consumption. But it was this tank unit coming back in. Well, where had it been? It had been in Crimea. It was further away from their home station to the exercise mode than their home station had. What they actually did, they took a rather large unit down to Crimea, ran probably tank gunnery with those guys, and then brought them back to their home station, which is closer to the Ukrainian border than where they were exercising in the Ukraine. That caught a lot of people. A lot of us thought that was funny because it was a brilliant. Oh, look at this video. The tanks are, it's like Afghanistan. Turrets to the rear. They're going across the bridge. It's all over. It's all over for the Russians. They're starting to wind it down. And every media giant out there took the hook, and they swallowed the lure so bad it dropped out their ass on the other end. But other people were saying, "Wait a minute, that particular unit is closer to the border now that it's done with training than it ever was when it was in the Crimea." So force structure forward is a very fluid environment. When you start doing plug and plays, I've seen fighter squadrons, 16 aircraft, and then they get to Aviano and it's like, wait, there's 42 aircraft here. Well, we changed some of the force structure. This was the Serbian conflict when we decided we didn't have near the cap capability. We were seeing a lot of Russian radar, but we didn't have the cap capability to do what we thought we were going to have to do, especially in Albania. And so packages change in a phone call. That's why it's a great point you bring up, because you have to have the rear ready to do that. So when you say, well, they've got the guy with the hairspray and the makeup on comes on TV and says there's 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. Okay. Have you done your homework? Do you realize that tactically there's another 150,000 work? They don't have to be there on day one. That's not even Russian military doctrine. And so this number that we stuck with, it was good. The media loved it. 100,000, 100,000. Oh my God, 100,000. So what percentage of their force had been alerted to stand by to support? That's probably, like I said, the estimates I believe are probably 250.
Yeah.
And how soon could you get that other 100 forward? Pretty damn quick. So we can't really just focus on what's on their border. Yeah, we can't. We can't focus on what's sitting on the Ukrainian border. Mm-hmm. We have to focus on what is it the Russians want to do and what's the resolve once they get started of doing it. Because they can bring forward anything you want. Now, your question about our force density, NATO is far more lethal than any unit that rolled out of training, even up to 2021 in the Russian military, is not as lethal as, for instance, the NATO QRF, 45,000 combatants. Then you start adding straps on there. You start adding aviation, you start adding tankers and fighters, air-to-ground and Saab movers, air-to-air war. You get all that crap in there, and it's mix and match. But if you had to take NATO and shove it to the forward edge, the problem is you can't get the force density into Europe before the Russians can get all that shit, that 250,000 strong to the rear, forward. They're closer to the contact line than you are. So you got a decision to make. Do you keep them from bringing that force forward, or do you back off of that forward edge of the battle area? Because the Russians will fight a linear battle area. They'll fight cyber and everything else, but they're still going to roll in their tradition. It's a crazy environment, and we go back to that thing, Tyberius. We have to ask the right questions. We should be asking the right questions when we see these White House press briefings. Not the White House, that's ridiculous. It's worthless. But the Pentagon briefing. Let's ask the right questions. And I just wish somebody would sneak in there. I wish somebody like Pedraeus, regardless of his personal life, a great strategician, a great warrior, to write out, hey, ask these 3 things tomorrow when you've got the ex-naval aviator up the podium talking, and just see what the difference is. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. You'd probably never be allowed in a room again, but it would be interesting.
Well, I'm surprised they're letting Petraeus sit in a room with all of them to begin with.
Oh, God, no. Yeah. They're pissed. They're pissed he was over there this week.
The response with responding with putting 18th on deck is the right response. When you're saying that they have like $100,000 up on the front line, right, with another $150K behind, what a lot of people don't realize is like, yes, 18th Airborne Corps has a shit ton of things within it, right? But what makes them beneficial, why they're put on deck, is not their capability, but the fact that their capability is combined with the fact that they can be anywhere. Like their entire thing is they can be anywhere in the world within 18 hours. Every unit under 18th Airborne Corps' command. So when he's saying like they can pull up to that front line quick with that 150K in the back, well, these people can be there with full, like the artillery brigade, the MPs for command and control. You have medical, you have transportation brigade, plus 80 seconds got God knows how many, 1, 2, 3rd, technically 4 BCTs, 10th Mountain, 3rd Infantry, to be over there within 18 hours. And that's a really easy way to respond to a show of force with a bigger show of force.
And I know doctrinally we say that, but in 32 years, other than the airborne boys and SF boys, I have never seen the Army move anywhere in mass in less than 30 days. I have never seen it. We were 4 months late getting the storm ready simply because it took forever to get the Army over there.
9/11 one day I was chilling watching TV, the next day I was in Afghanistan. I swear to fucking God.
Yeah, well, yeah, but now get
if you're trying to go, I'm talking like, if you're trying to, but that's Fort Hood and stuff, right? The airborne boys, this is what they do. This is like literally the whole thing.
Yeah, so like I want to back up Samantha a little bit with this. The reason why I was actually confused that 18th Airborne was actually the one getting deployed is that I thought it would be the smarter move to move 3rd, because third is most of your mechanized forces. That's the heavy shit that was actually originally supposed to fight in Europe. That's been upgraded.
What's our mechanized shit is in Europe? First AD.
First AD should be operating out of Kansas right now.
Or they have an element in bomb holder.
I could believe that.
Yeah, I would tell you the nightmare that NATO planners always had from day one, regardless of what the services can promise the world. The Army can move like force is easy. The bulk of the Army is gray holes. I mean, the reason during the Cold War we had to have the craft program to where we could actually confiscate every civilian aircraft there was in the inventory is because we don't have enough gray tails and gray holes to move the Army. We never have. It's always been too expensive. If you want to move core level units into theater quickly, you're going to have to break a lot of rules to try and do that. And they're still not going to be FMC. You know, they can't. Hell, they can't get the stuff to them. You can get the Joes there.
Yeah, realistically under 82nd can probably roll out 2 brigades at a time, 2 BCTs at a time, at a go. So you'd be able to put like second or third, like 505th, 504th, you know, any one of those, right? You'd be able to roll like 2 of those out at a time with how many 130s and 131s we got. Which is probably what they're going to do, is get the shooter boys down first. Just because they're going to be the scarier ones.
Well, there's a lot of gray tail commitment.
The rest will come up with, they'll probably pull MPs and then transportation or artillery second, just to get some command and control going.
NATO's chance of blunting the Russians coming after any of those mustard-colored country, quite honestly, is air power. You're going to have to blunt them with things that can physically, you can increase the totality of your lethality in hours. But you can bring over first fighter wing. You can bring everything out of Aviano. You can shift. You know, if I'm moving at 700 miles an hour and I got to hit 4 tankers to get there, I'm a shitload faster than a C-17 bringing a bunch of airborne Joes over there. And oh, by the way, you better make sure those airborne Joes can fight that armor when they get there, because you
just put a bunch of drones in Romania, though.
But yeah,
we just put
move a NATO force
like long range drones to be able to handle that capabilities until we can get Air Force over there.
The long range stuff that's going to hit them isn't. You're not going to fight Russian armor with just drones. You might do swarm drones. You know, we're into that now. I've got a buddy that playing with one of those units, but my opinion, if you want to ask my opinion, getting the force density into Europe to prepare for a Russian push against the mustard-colored states or nations in that map, it would take a mobilization process here in the United States that would shock the American public. And you can no longer sit in the White House and say, well, you know, we're not going to fight in Ukraine, but we are going to do the largest mobilization since Desert Storm to put troops in Europe. The media's got to have a nervous breakdown. The political parties are going to start screaming at each other. The Russians just have to park. And this little dot they put over in the southwest corner of Belarus, this mobility training center, as they call it, which is actually it's an ammo dump. It's what the hell the thing is. It's up on the Polish border. And as they start to put more of those dots out there, it's just the pressure. It's the presence pressure of what they did. When they used to run to the wire on us in the Volga Gap, you know, it was pretty well. We have a force in place to slow down the Volga Gap breach, premised on the fact that we know they're coming into the Volga Gap. If they got to the Volga Gap during one of their exercises, like they would do, like the North Koreans did us for years, run to the wire, jump back, run to the wire, jump back, and then you got to figure out when they're really doing it. The force density that can get into the fight quickly in Europe, NATO's going to struggle. They're absolutely going to struggle. That's why I think Defender Europe this year was the largest exercise since the 80s, because they got to figure this out. And you know, I can show that map tomorrow of who attended that exercise. Headquarters level, everybody attended the exercise, which is interesting because it was almost like they said, we got to shake the dust off this old reforger and figure out if NATO can no shit do this. it's one thing to say you've got the capability to do it, but you have to execute it too. You get to Dover and you've got 6 gray tail sitting there, and a crew chief comes out and says, nope, 2 are down. We got struck problems, we got 2 down. And you're like, shit, okay, you got to reroute aircraft me to pick up the rest of the guys. Yes, all right, got it. And then the more it starts to spin like that, the more the fog of pre-war operations take place. NATO hasn't run themselves through, other than tabletops. The last one I did was in 2007. Yeah, 2007. And they can tabletop it, but once you say, like we did this year, here comes Defender Europe. Here comes the combined arms of NATO, all the NATO allies, and the U.S. into the European theater to defend the mustard-colored part of the map. And the after actions on that thing will take another, it'd probably be August before that thing comes out. But the after actions on it will be, to me, very interesting. Because could we really do it? We say we can do it, but I've been on the bad end of, hey, we're bringing you a bunch of shit. Matter of fact, 18th Airborne Corps, a detachment, a round out unit at Tirana, Albania. 3 days, be there in 3 days. 4 weeks later, where the hell are you? We're at Aviano. We've gone into remissioning at Aviano. All right, so I'm running convoys up and down a switchback with every Serbian 4-year-old sniper shooting at us, and you guys are still in Aviano. Logically, it sounds like we could get there. Every service writes, the Army never wants to write a plan that shows how slow they are. They can't do that. They have elements that are fast, but moving the Army to fight a theater level war, no, we'll have to see what European Defender taught us.
All right, I want to pause there, and I want to kind of redirect the conversation into kind of going full circle here. So we've talked about the Russians are in theater. They are moving into what effectively is, in all regards, Ukrainian soil at this point, and we're talking about the American response. So there is a window here where if the Russians wanted to go bonsai, they could. Now, I don't actually personally expect them to do that, but I do expect that they have many things going on here, many different objectives. So, Dan, the final phase of this conversation that I want to put out there is, what is to be expected over, say, the next week, and what is more importantly, like, what does the rest of the year look like? Because some people are like, oh, World War III. I think that's a misnomer in every way, but I'm sitting here thinking we could see the largest military operation in Europe since 45.
Yeah, and I think and probably in the best case scenario, by the end of this summer, we may just be getting used to back to the old Cold War days of, again, the Folga Gap theory of you're on one side of the wire, we're on the other side of the wire. The Poles are going batshit crazy right now. They want 10 times more stuff than they could they couldn't garrison what the hell they're screaming for. But we could end the summer without the Russians touching the mustard color states, just staying up on that line now between Belarus and the Ukraine. If they take all the Ukraine, we could end the summer back into where all the politicians and all the medias are going, well, we're back in a Cold War. Okay, that could be. We need to take to heart what this man has said. People, and I've told you this before, Tiberius, never, ever, ever look at Putin as a politician. Never look at him from the glasses of our country. Do not look at him as a guy that's speaking to be popular, that's speaking to get 2 points up in the poll in North Carolina. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. When he comes to a table and he sits in his chair, posturing himself the same way he postures to his generals when they're briefing him, and he says, our back's against the wall. You've come too far east. I need you to guarantee me that this is going to change. He doesn't have to say, or I'll go to war, because he knows you're going to speculate that. Do they take all of the Ukraine? My hunch right now is they almost have to. I mean, you can't come in there and give such a volatile speech like he did yesterday about the Ukraine, not Donbass, not the 2 breakaway provinces, not Crimea, Ukraine belongs to them. It belongs to them. Its history is with them. Is it true? Doesn't matter. If they believe it and that's their stance, then they have to go after the whole enchilada. They have to. They can't end with him saying the whole thing belongs to us, and what they stand up on at the end of the day is they took the Donbass away from the Ukraine. If you're going to take an economic ass whooping, at least try and achieve your objective while you're doing it. Mm-hmm. So getting in the head of Putin, tough, real tough. But everything about him and his speech yesterday, that is a brand new Putin. That is not one of our politicians. He doesn't have hairspray. He doesn't wear makeup. He doesn't give a shit about extra lighting to make him look good in the room. He doesn't care about any of that shit. And none of his staff does either. These are Klingons. And when you come in there and you try and look at a Klingon lord from a Western aspect, well, I'm going to hurt you economically. I don't give a shit. Well, I don't care. I don't think you got the stomach to do anything about it. We're dealing with a very different man as of yesterday. He crossed the bridge yesterday. You've heard me talk about 2 years ago, we watched the Chinese train change. Virtually overnight, Chinese changed. Very non-committal, very self-containing, don't get in anybody's business, stay out of everybody's business. And then, boom, the wolf warriors show up. And China changes its disposition towards the entire freaking world. And the wolf warriors are out there every day now, everywhere in the world talking. They threaten the hell out of Asia every day in every meeting. You can't have a college campus meeting without somebody that represents the wolf warriors going in there. Who you got to hitch your wagon to? Who? You got to hook on the United States for the rest of the 21st century? You got to hook on to us. Resolve is something, it seems like we here in the United States and in D.C., we have forgotten the definition of resolve. Because when you get right down to it, where's the resolve with us compared to the resolve with them? And to me, Tiberius, going through the week, if he pushes, he has to get the Ukrainians to shoot at him. This false flag, you don't have to get a false flag. If I can get within range of where you've decided to try and hold up, and I start pounding your ass, you're either going to throw a white flag up, or you're going to shoot back. And once you shoot back, boom, I got you. We've talked all this week about they're goading the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can't be goaded into firing back. Well, at some point in time, you're going to get goaded. I mean, if not, just keep driving towards the capital.
All right, fair enough. So here's where this goes in a little bit more long term. What is the actual Western response? Because I think me and you are probably going to agree with this. No one's actually on the same page with this one. Like, the Germans are saying they might shut down Nord Stream? Not a chance in hell. The French are trying to find out, or the French are actually pretty much defecting at this point, where they're like, any kind of security agreement? Yeah, the Russians have to be involved. And what Biden in Washington is saying is the exact opposite of that. So for me, I totally can see Ukraine going. The question is, what happens after that? Is that the end of NATO in 18 months? I think that sounds a little extreme, but on the other hand is that no one agrees here, and without basically the call to arms element from Washington that has yet to even make a national address.
It's hard to agree for a lot of Europe, though, because you got to understand, like, a lot of Europe relies on Russia.
Yeah.
Like, Germany is one of our biggest military allies, and their hands are behind their back. They get 85% of their energy from Russia. What are they going to? And Russia pulled a fucking like a test, right? Tried to test them, and Germany didn't flinch. I don't know what the fuck France is doing, because they're pretty much self-reliant energy-wise, and so they don't really rely on Russia. They are mostly covered in nuclear, and I think they actually have an excess of energy. So I don't know what the fuck their problem is, other than being French. But most of Europe,
well, at least the Italians finally showed up.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear both of you at the same time. Sam and then Colonel, please.
Oh, go ahead. What were you saying about the Italians?
I said at least the Italians finally showed up. I kept saying all last week the soccer tournament must be over because all of a sudden the Italians popped on the scene.
Yeah, their coffee break's over. Fucking losers. Yeah.
What are the Italians saying, actually? I'm quite curious of what they decided to add into this conversation.
Well, you know, they too have spoke to Putin. They too have said that diplomacy is the only way out of it. I think what Italy did is the rest of the EU was looking at Italy going, hey, where the hell are you? Everybody's talking, you're not talking. It's 3 weeks. Where the hell have you been? So they were like, shit, I guess we got to go say something. So they jump up, you know, they say something. Putin probably nods his head and looks at him like, you know, fix me a pizza or something. But yeah, they popped up the scene for a little while. But hey, Tiberius, think of this in a different direction.
Sure.
When you sit there and say, what's the future of NATO? Expand your premise here.
Yep.
What's the future of the EU? Because Samantha's absolutely right. There's no unity. No. And we've known there's no unity. And nobody knows more than the Russians in Moscow. There is no unity. The French are trying to solve it for themselves. They want to be the new king on the block. The Germans are trying to solve it. The French are tired of Merkel dominating the EU for the last 16 years. There's no unity. When push comes to shove, you're all about you, baby. And so what's the future of the EU? Not just NATO, because the Russians are saying you guys aren't unified for shit.
And they're right. And that's the thing that I've been saying for a while. And of course, I kind of parrot Peter Zion on this one. One of these crises we're eventually going to tear the EU apart, and this might be the one that does it, where it's just like NATO and the EU basically just kind of goes mask off, and they admit that the French don't want to ask the Germans to invade Poland to fight the Russians. Like, that literally, that meme is not real. So in the regard of this is, I don't see a future for the Europeans. I didn't see one past 2035 in any way. You've got demographic problems. You've got an energy crisis. You have a political crisis. Their economies are like grinding down. Yeah, like Europe was toast, and so I'm just surprised that it looks like it might actually end up being this early.
Yeah, and if you don't have a truly unionized EU, then what do you have for NATO? You know, you walk in the NATO headquarters, and you sit down and you look at the chairs, like in the Joint Operations Center, the Awareness Center, like the JFC, and you look at that table, and there's, you know, here's a German rep, here's a French rep, here's the 31 reps of NATO that have their battle captains 24/7 sitting in a room. And you know what the job of those people is? They don't commit shit from their country to NATO. Nothing. They commit nothing.
Yeah.
They don't, I lost you for a second, but they don't commit anything until they hear from their leadership. Bosnia proved that to us. Well, you know, look what the hell the French did to us in Albania. You know, you're part. You know, okay, NATO. Well, you know, we're working through some issues right now. What the hell are you in this game or not? And so, you know, even the philosophy of NATO will speak with a unified voice. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. Show me, because I've been on the other end of you didn't show me. Well, there's an excuse. They're not going to be here. You're going to have to substitute some of your people to do something else, do longer patrols, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But that there's a point in the NATO headquarters. You don't get Germany just says, hey, I don't need to talk to Schultz. I'm telling you, I'm going to send you 35 fighter aircraft and 5 tankers first thing in the morning. You can't do that. They have to take every request of them back through their food chain. That's how it actually works. Mm-hmm. That's why we moved that whole piece of shit process out of CENTCOM and into the parking lot. We actually put all that shit in the parking lot in CENTCOM because Tommy Franks was like, I don't have time for all this shit. If I get a unit screaming for help, I'm pounding somebody's ass somewhere. And I'm not waiting to hear if you can help or not. I have no doubt that would happen again. Hey, look at the structure of NATO. You got NATO command, but what do you also have in Europe? You have U.S. command. And why? Because deep down inside, we don't know what the hell NATO's going to commit to if shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm. So we're actually at a kind of a breaching crisis where Europe is starting to look at us like, hey, are we going to be there? But we're also sitting there going, hey, Europe, are you going to be here at all either?
Well, yeah, I don't want to hear, are you going to be here? And you're talking to me from the other side of the field.
Right.
You know,
It's like, you're going to be here. I'm like, yeah,
Berlin.
Where's that German First Armored Division? Oh, wait, it doesn't exist.
Don't sit in Berlin drinking 12% beer and ask me where I am. You better be wounded in the fucking field hospital worrying about where I am. Your ass better not be back somewhere else trying to strike deals.
So what do you think is the future going down for this? And if it's too big, I totally get it, because we're talking, like the next 3 years overall. But I don't see a future where this works out unless literally somehow Biden just loses his old man syndrome. He starts having the gravitas and charisma of a 35-year-old, which he thinks he is. I don't see a good future for Eastern Europe at this point. I really don't.
No, I think the Balkan states are scared shitless. The attitude I talked about yesterday, the mustard-colored states, those 14 nations that joined NATO since 1995, their attitude towards this is distinctly different than the rest of Europe, the traditional part of NATO, the part before expansion. The French want to talk, the Germans want to talk, off-ramp, all this good crap. And you got the rest of those guys, especially up in the Balkan states, going, I understand you want to talk. Can you send me another 5,000 troops in the meantime?
Just out of curiosity, when you say a Balkan, do you mean Baltic? The Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Yeah. Okay, just making sure.
And what did Biden say today? We're sending, what was it, 800 troops to the Baltics, and I think he actually picked out Lithuania. They must have been crying, and they're kind of the spokesperson for the three of them. But yeah, they got to be worried to death, absolutely worried to death, compared to the Germans, who, like Samantha said, this bullshit of turning off Nord Stream 2. Come on, you get a next cold snap in Europe, and you get Europeans freezing their ass off because they've drained their reserves, and they've lost 35% of their inbound fuel, because who knows what else the Russians turn off. What's in their plan? Hey, if you piss us off, if you sanction us, we'll turn all the shit off.
No, yeah,
that's
literally what they said to Germany.
China in a heartbeat.
That's literally what they said to Germany, and the only other recourse they have is okay, cool, you don't get your energy and fuel from Russia, you're going to get it from China, which is still not good for us. But the thing is, Europe doesn't want to do anything, but at the same time, they do want America to do something. But however, they want to be able to be in the position where it's no, Russia, look, it's not us, it's America. Your problem's with them. Leave us the fuck out of it. We're just chilling. Don't fuck with us. Right now we're seeing that we have very few allies that are willing to go in with us if we go all in, but they're also wanting us to go all in, but not wanting to say that they want us to go all in.
Exactly.
It's like a crazy girlfriend that expects you to read their mind. It's not happening. We just kind of got to figure it out and do what we got to do. And a lot of America's not going to support. And I've bitched about this a lot of times, of letting us do what we need to do. If you really want to get this to stop, it's not going to be fucking pretty, but it can't be pretty.
Yeah, and I'm kind of there, and people have asked me, what would I have done? And my whole thing was, and I talked about this with Dan maybe 2 weeks ago, probably wouldn't have been in time, but I said mobilize Third Corps and get them over to Kiev. Now, I was under the impression that we actually have a defensive pact with Ukraine as part of the, was it 93-94 deal with denuclearization, but apparently that was not actually what the writing was.
Yeah, that clause never got put in there. The only thing we have is a training agreement. Mm-hmm. We have the infamous advisors. That's a fun role. And then you have your trainers, like this whole story last week about the Florida Army National Guard being pulled out and sent over to Poland. But I'll switch gears on you. Here's the danger zone, buddy. Mm-hmm. The danger zone is, if we're sitting around waiting to see what Putin's next move is, and God forsake, Putin's next move is to do exactly what we fear he's going to do, and that's just go after the whole enchilada. What does Poland do with 5 million refugees? And they're not coming from Syria. It doesn't take them 162 days to get from Aleppo to Belarus to get into Polish territory. It takes them 10 hours. A week if they're walking. Yeah, a week if they're walking. What do you do with 5 million people? How pissed off you think the Poles are going to be? You know,
and they already have a reactionary right-wing government.
Germans?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I forgot that you're delayed a little bit because of your internet. I like you. We're already talking about a reactionary right-wing government within Poland. Like, this is a government that actually like almost tried to completely outlaw abortion within the country. This is Europe, right? They're a little more progressive than we are. All of a sudden, like this is the kind of state that we're already dealing with. The other side of that is that I had a question from Twisted that I wanted to redirect to for just a second.
Is that Aviator? Is he awake?
Yeah, he is awake.
Okay.
Twisted Aviator had a question for you in particular that I wanted to address, and then we can go back to this. Question for the Colonel. Wall call pull out of my butt question. When the Budapest memo was put in place and Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, which was what I was talking about, was there ever a full accounting done of all the weapons by Russia when they were returned? Is there any possibility Ukraine hid some somewhere?
Twisted, you have a deviant mind. I will tell you that much. I spent about 5 years in generically what would be called a nuclear recovery capability. When that agreement was signed, I would tell you that one of the first conversations that took place with us and Europe, when this agreement was signed and all these warheads were going to be shipped back and taken away, the argument became who's moving them, who's touching them, where are they going? And the Russians came in with, well, hell, there are warheads. And we were like, well, no, they were. They're not anymore. So there was a lot of conspiracy theorism right around the time that whole thing took place of what was the count? Well, it was, 3,326. Okay. Well, according to the checklist of the UN independent overseers, which we had, we're at 3,328. How did we recover more than you said was in the nation? And so, yeah, he hit the nail on the head. Is what's the guarantee? There's no guarantee. There's not. Are they functional? Oh, hell no. They're not functional. You talk about a logistics baby nightmare. Those things are maintenance pigs. If you decide to hide one in a barn somewhere to keep it in case you ever do have a problem, you got a dirty bomb at best by the time it's all said and done. But remember all the talk, Tiberius and Samantha, I know you remember this, and Aviator. Remember all the talk about the infamous Russian satchel nukes?
Oh my God! Please don't even remind me.
Remember how that went crazy?
Yeah. Suitcase bombs. Oh my God.
Yeah, there you go. And that was kind of the same arena we were in when we were getting ready to do this joint program to get all these weapons out of Ukraine. We went through this same tirade of discussions. And I bet you there are people in Moscow that probably say they kept a couple. They kept a couple. Now, they're not functional by this point in time, but remember the message went out the other day about potential terrorist attacks in Russia? And some of the Russians are like, well, Ukrainians could do a dirty bomb. Well, where'd they get it? Are you insinuating they kept warheads when it was all said? There's so much fog on this battlefield. There's so much fog before the battle, during the battle, and there's going to be more fog after the battle. But my going into 23 February, my biggest question I have, and this is something I'm going to talk about tomorrow, is it possible that Putin, in his plan, has designed a phase of the plan that destabilizes Poland and its relationship with Europe without firing a shot at the Poles? You don't have to shoot at them. You don't have to cyber hit them. Send a human wave against them. Do what the Russians did in 2015 to Europe. Send a wave of people into the country and get the governments turning on themselves. You just said it. You know, a more radical element in Poland right now is not happy with the way Poland's being run. Shove a couple million people into Poland and see how it goes. You know, they've already got a pretty large population of Ukrainians there anyway.
Polish fascists.
Yeah.
I love what we do.
Make a t-shirt.
No, like 100%. Like literally, we can see the rise of Polish fascism, and like I love that little meme that I said earlier, but I mean it. It's like we're literally living in a world where the French have to ask the Germans to go into Poland to fight the Russians. That is the world that we currently live in. Oh, yeah. Holy shit. Oh, and by the way,
we have an expectation that the Poles will work hand in hand with the Germans. You know,
that'll
looks
go well.
Good on paper.
That'll go
when
so well.
When the generals are in the reviewing stand, the exercise looks good. When the shit hits the fan, where is it?
It's like, oh wait, you want to rely on the guys who like occupied us for over 200 years? That sounds great.
I truly believe Putin can easily destabilize Poland in the middle of this whole crisis.
I believe it.
And again, let's ask the right questions. Let's go to the White House, Panoply pit stop, or the Teletubby at the State Department, and let's say, hey, if the human wave hits Poland from a generalized invasion of Ukraine, what's the procedure to help Poland deal with it? Where is it? Because that camp of those $1 million white tents you set up, that ain't going to do shit. That's not even the bathroom facilities for 3 million people over 90 days. We need to be asking the right questions.
All right, so I want to finish out with this a little bit of future casting because we've kind of outlined like all the dangers, but this is just wargaming. Like, what is the eventual wargame here? Because for what I'm seeing, just from talking to you, and it makes a lot of sense, is that the wargame is Ukraine falls over the next 3 months. And then you've got a human wave into Europe, and then you have basically the splintering of the EU and NATO over, 9 to 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, what is the second, classic military doctrinal preparation? What you have an entire team on war plan teams, and you're talking teams of roundout teams are about 400 people, and they're typically operational commanders who get sucked in to make sure everything that's relevant about how they would do their business is in the plan. You don't bring in the Georgetown PhD kid. He's there. He may be a pain in your ass, but typically the planners, especially at the combatant commands, they bring their commanders in, and they'll put a piece of the plan in front of them. They'll have like a brief back day. Thursday from 0800 to 1300 is brief back. And it's brief back on this particular phase of the plan. And the room fills up like at Camp Doha we did it for the invasion of Iraq. And you sit back and a room of commanders sit there and they start going through it. And next thing you know, you hear horse shit. Where did you get that? Well, blah, blah, blah. There's like a Fifth Army guy, a planner from Fifth Army or something, that will say something. And you'll have some BCT commander or 3, because he sits there with his 3 and his 5, and they're like, bullshit. That's not how that could be. And then you got to go back and fix that part of the plan. When you go through all of that crap, when you get through a plan, if you've written one that's so detailed that in that plan you anticipate spooking the cattle, the people in the Ukraine, and make them run west, and at the end of that process, I never touched NATO, but now Europe's in chaos. I mean, they shit themselves over 150,000 people in a 7-month period in 2015. What do they do when it's 3 million, 5 million? Can you destabilize your opponent with never firing a shot?
Directly at them, at least.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, you got to shoot at the cattle. You got to get them running.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think about this exactly in that regard, but it makes more sense. Is that you don't have to break NATO, or I'm sorry, you don't have to beat NATO. You just break NATO, and a human refugee wave is going to be far more effective against a liberal democracy than an outright invasion will be. Like an invasion is a unifying force. Like I honestly believe that you could easily get NATO to show up if Poland's being invaded by the Russians again. I think that just reminds Europe too much of what history has already been. But a human wave where the Poles are telling everybody to get fucked because they couldn't help them? Different conversation.
Yeah, and who do they turn to? Where are the rest of you? Where are you, France? Where are you, Germany? Where are you, United States? Who do they turn to? Because they can't do it. They don't have they don't. There is no way. The Turks were prepared to receive Aleppo when they knew Aleppo was going to fall. Mm-hmm. And then once the Russians said, well, watch this, we'll spook the cattle, we'll bomb the piss out of Aleppo, and then we'll really get them moving. And the Turks like, oh, no. Screw those camps. Send that shit into Europe. That's what they did. What do the Germans do, Tiberius, if the Poles say, keep moving, let's go. Germany's that way. Just keep going. Here's your sandwich. Get on this bus. We're taking to the German border. Because you ain't staying in Poland.
Oh, God, I didn't even think about that. Oh, hey, cool. Hey, does anyone want to see the AfD become the majority ruling party in Germany now? Because that's how you get it.
Yeah. Like my speculation is Poland would just open the gates. It's what the Turks had to do. And the Turks were far more capable of taking care of people than the Poles are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just if anyone doesn't know, AfD is Alternative for Deutschland and Germany, and they are what is seen as a far right right-wing government or party. Before the Syrian refugee crisis, we're talking about a country or a party that was about 4.7, just under like the threshold where they deserved representation. After that, they bumped up to like 12.1. But it was like 12.1, 12.3. And that was 1 million people who would eventually enter Germany. Imagine a possible another 1 million, 2 million that would be going to Germany for refugee status. That's the end of Europe.
Yeah, it's not Zombieland. They don't show up in 12 hours. They show up over like 90 days.
Right. Right. Sorry, I'm being a little hyperbolic. But what I'm actually getting at, though, is overall, if this is what happens to Europe, right, you're talking about a situation where Germany becomes a far right-wing government again since the first time since 1945. What's their solution for everything? German history. You rearm, you re-equip, and you go fight. Cool. We have our scenario for how the Germans and the Russians get into another major war. Hooray.
Yeah. No, it's... Again, what are the right questions to ask of our leadership? Whatever we have in D.C., to hell with the party policies, to hell with the ideologies, what are the right questions to ask these people when they say, yeah, Bob, you from ABC, what's your question? I already know Bob's question. I loved, Tiberius, I loved how the first thing the U.S. media said yesterday was, well, Putin's National Security Council meeting was a made-for-TV event. And it was like, oh, my God, look at Putin. This is so fake. What the hell do you think the Pentagon and State Department and White House briefings are? When you can come up there and Penelope Pitstop has a folder that's 6 inches thick, and as you're asking a question, she's looking for her notes on that question and she's thumbing through. You ever watch her when she's doing it? It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. No one's going to be allowed to come into that room unless you're a Fox guy. Then you're a dumb bastard, if you work for Fox News. But we script everything that we do when we talk to the American public, and yet we have this hissy fit yesterday that, Putin scripted his National Defense Council meeting yesterday. Really? That's what you're going to focus on? We're on a different plane than them right now. We got to get on the same plane. You can't figure out a potential battlefield with an adversary and you and your allies on different planes. It doesn't. It's physics. It doesn't line up. You got to get on the same plane. You have to make a hard decision.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It most definitely just doesn't work when we're talking about people that just don't have a plan. They don't have a plan for this, and it's very apparent. And that, we can. The one thing that me and you agree on more than anything is that it has been a lack of American plan and leadership going back since the end of the Cold War, and why we're in this situation. We're looking at the barrel of China rising, and we could have had a Russian ally to help contain that. We beat them. We could have turned them into or brought them into the family, but we didn't.
We're let a guy like George Soros destroy any capability of that happening.
Yeah.
We have other options, though.
All right.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So there's more important questions that we can ask here, right?
Uh-oh.
So you got Putin focused on this fucking Ukraine border and Belarus trying to cocksuck Putin and be like, hey, we'll do whatever you do, daddy, right? And, you have all this. Like, we can just get some troops moving over there, put a show of force, nice little front. And while he's distracted with Ukraine, we invade Russia, okay?
There you go.
Russia and make it a parking lot for China, okay? This is what we need to do. Fuck Russia, fuck this Ukraine bullshit. Fuck, why are we dilly-dallying in Ukraine? That's a small battlefront. Do you know how much borderland there is in Russia for us to fuck up? Let's go.
Samantha, I think you may be a reincarnated General LeMay.
You know what? I'll take it.
All right.
No, damn it. I get it. It's a valid point. I mean, when are we going to demand of our own leadership to answer the right questions? And who the hell do we get to go ask the right questions? Because everything is so scripted. The White House, the State Department, the Pentagon right now. The only time you run into trouble with our administration getting out of character is if you have the foreign press, like when Harris was over at the Munich Security Conference. And I kept saying, she'll give a great speech, but it's canned, and it's going to tell the same four talking points the administration's had since April. But if they go into a question and answer period and her staff can't control, yes, ma'am, I'm Smirnoff Mirnoff from TASS News Agency, and I ask you a question, you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it. And then you look stupid. So you notice they hid after the Munich Security Conference. They hid from press conferences. They did little scripted things like she sat down with Zelensky and they asked they each said something that they knew they were going to say, but they didn't stick her out in front of the dogs because we're not ready to answer because we don't have an answer.
How the mighty have fallen. I apologize. I know the United States has over 2 million people that help facilitate the administration and functionality of the United States. And whenever I get told that we don't have a plan, I just want to die inside. I really do.
They don't have a plan. I do.
You do, but your plan is not of sound mind.
It doesn't matter.
Galapagos Islands before we do your plan.
Russia's already bleeding out money with their dumb shit to begin with. So, realistically, it's just we can just stalemate them until they can't afford to pay their troops anymore. Or we can go in with such harshness and violence and fucking haste that no troop would want to take orders to go to the Ukrainian border, which is, I think, the better option. Fucking, if NATO doesn't want to play, we don't play by NATO's rules, right? We just show up, white phosphorus the fuck out of everything, and start launching JDAMs into fucking people's faces, and be like, "Oh shit, no, we don't want to go fight the Americans on the Ukrainian border. There's no fucking rules of engagement going on. They just fucking they shooting people out here for real. They shooting people for fucking real."
So Samantha's and I'm old. This is my favorite program. Samantha to me is the James T. Kirk when he fought the Klingon commander. Kirk stood there and knew he had to fight this guy. He's bigger, he's stronger. And the first thing Kirk did was kick him in the balls.
Well, because here's you're not going to be able to break down Putin and get to a peaceful resolution, right? But what you can do is soldiers are easy to break. I hate to be mask off here. You can fucking break soldiers. You can get soldiers to where they don't want to go there. I've seen soldiers scared to go to different front lines in different areas before. Nobody wanted to go to Korangal Valley. Nobody wanted to go to Korangal motherfucking Valley. That is literally hell on earth. I've talked about it many times. You can make it. You can demoralize these Russian troops easily. If you go in there with an amount of violence that they are not expecting because they're expecting America to play by the rules, make the rules go the fuck away. Don't play by the rules. Fucking just drop fucking ordnance that is way overkill on people. Drop bunker busters onto fucking people. Okay? Just make entire tank divisions disappear. Armor? Fuck
the
armor.
AOC clan would attack Congress.
AOC can suck my dick. But you could be more have it so that the troops in Moscow or on the back line or whatever, they're too afraid. They will disobey a direct order because they don't want to go fight the Americans because they're psychotic fucking nutcases. And you know what? There's a lot of people within the infantry that I have met personally that would be so down for breaking some fucking Geneva Conventions and some NATO fucking restrictions. Okay? They're down. They'll be throwing piss bottles at Russians and just lighting shit on fire. I mean, I served along people that dipped their bullets in fucking vats of pork blood and bacon fat just to go kill some Hajis. We're psychotic. Bring back the era of where we were wearing infidel shirts walking around Baghdad. But let's do that in Russia and make it worse. We'll write Anastasia on all of our ammunition.
I just need enough time to get the Galapagos Islands. That's all.
This is for the Romanovs, okay? This is for the Romanovs.
All right, so I hate that the memes have begun, but we have been going for almost 2 hours. So I do want to start wrapping this up, and I do appreciate the laugh, Sam. That was some comedy gold. I appreciate that.
What comedy?
Zen, thank you for 18 months of subscribing on Twitch. I appreciate that, buddy.
That's my new name for Samantha now. I'm going to just call him General LeMay. Beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who's literally lit joints over there with money that had Saddam's face on it, okay? You know how it felt light up a J with some fucking dinars? Fucking wonderful. We can do the same thing, except I can light a blunt with some vodka that we light on fire. Destroy, demoralize all of Russia. Just send drone strikes to distilleries. We win instantly.
I still have my Holy War, Holy Shit t-shirt from Desert Storm. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Get that kind of propaganda out nowadays if we had to.
I have my, when we swapped over to ACUs, I have my tan top under my ACUs that our commander got us that says, I survived Ramadan 2006 when we were out by Ramadi.
Hey, Tiberius.
Yes, sir.
Here's one for you.
Uh-oh.
This summer, we did the largest NATO defensive exercise in almost 40 years. We dusted off a plan we had barely touched in 40 years. We had done, planning teams have it on their calendar. There's a Google calendar and comes in, hey, we got to look at Annex C between the 17th and 19th of February, and you go through 500 annexes. And that's all this team does. They come to work and they go through these things to see if there's any inputs from the field for potential changes. But we haven't taken the plan, put units in the field, even at a very reduced rate, and exercised the plan until this summer. This summer we did it. For the first time in 40 years. And now, in order to get that plan ready, you had to do it the year before. You don't go to an exercise you don't say, what do you want to do, Bob? Shit, let's go to Germany and blow some shit up. It doesn't work that way. Last year, after the tabletop version of Defender Europe Defender, whatever the hell NATO calls it now, somebody made a decision, no. We need to do a no bullshit full scale. Why? Why did we do a full-scale exercise of defending those 14 new NATO members this summer? And if we planned for it last year, can you look at the American people and say, well, okay, I'm not going to bullshit you anymore. We've known for about 2 years now that Putin has a very complex plan to push back against NATO. Well, why the hell didn't we say that 2 years ago? Why don't we have all the forces in place right now to make sure that doesn't happen? Before you put your shit on the Ukrainian border, my shit's already over there. We didn't do it. Why? Why didn't we do it?
I have a theory here, and that just would basically be a change in administration. That was the plan, to some degree, at least for the literally year 5 of the Trump administration. And because we do not have a Trump administration anymore, Biden's got a whole new plan with a whole new military, if you will. Because I mean, me and you have even talked about how much or how politically active we have made the officer corps in terms of, oh, we don't like you and what you say as a general. We'll rotate you out for another 2-star. Like, that's a thing now.
Oh, look, I've told you this.
Yeah.
When my 2-star told me that if I was willing to move PCS, come into that shithole called DC, I was on a line to make 3 stars. I could have became his boss after he retired. But you know what? I absolutely, well, first off, I had 2 friends that were already 2 stars, and they were, every time I talked to them, it was like, for God's sake, Dan, don't do this. You sell your soul to come in here and chase that 3rd star. And by the time you get your 4-star, you belong to the devil. It's very hard to find 4 stars that have a climate survey with ground level troops that's worth a shit. They're typically combatant commands. Guys like Tommy Franks, guys like Zinni, before Tommy Franks. To me, the best commander CENTCOM's had since Arnold Schwarzkopf, since Schwarzkopf. Yeah, you have to sell your soul. And I think you nailed it. I think you answered the question. We are so politically unstable. All we do is go from election to election. The day after the election, who's the favored child for 2024? Who's going to win the out-year election? All DC gives a shit about is getting in power and staying in power. Don't lose the House. Don't lose, hold on to Congress, hold on to the Senate, hold on to the White House. And then you got this tyrannical imperialist czar that sits over there and says, I'm so frickin' stable, I can write a 15-year plan. And now we have to deal with that. We've got romper room in D.C. with strap hangers from Teletubby Land, all the other federal agencies that drove me insane. And the Russians have what? They have a czar. The Chinese have what? They have an emperor. And so consistent planning is much easier to do than the chaos, like you just said, that DC is. If the anticipation Trump was going to win and Trump wanted to do a major exercise in Europe, who knows? We are so in flux all the time. We are going to struggle, and we are right here, right now. We're struggling with putting up a good fence against a very determined adversary.
Okay, well, actually, this is more of a meta-history conversation here. But one of the things that I've always kind of attributed to the Americans, I want to see if you agree, is that we are very bad at being a proactive force or a proactive nation in general. We are a very reactive nation, and that comes with very strong cost benefits. We're usually not the ones that goes in guns a-blazing and charging when we want to. We're always not Desert Storm. Actually, yeah, Desert Storm. Afghanistan, 2001. We kind of just go wherever we're kind of influenced into. The good thing about that is that we're not usually the first guys to the fight, so we get time to figure out how everyone else is fighting. Such as, example recently was Azerbaijan, Armenia. We're seeing what happens on the 21st century battlefield without necessarily doing every conflict. Now it looks like we're on the back foot of that. We don't have a plan. So, what is the United States' number one? Do you agree with me? We're just a reactive force, and then two, what's the United States' reaction to where we're going?
Brilliant courses of action are always put forth by certain organizations, specifically the Pentagon. If you ask the Pentagon to write a contingency plan for an event, they will write it, and they will write it to the gnat's ass detail, and you will die from PowerPoint 1,000 times over if you're involved in it. The problem becomes, just like the fiasco of Afghanistan when we left, you have to take those courses of action. You have to go sit down with the president and his national security team, and you have to tell them the ups and downs of each course of action, and then you ask them to pick one. And typically what happens in D.C., what the Biden administration did in Afghanistan, are absolutely positively, there's no argument about it. What the Biden administration said was, well, I like course of action 2, but I don't like the timeline. So I want you to do course of action 2 because I want a smaller footprint. But I don't want this 30-day out buildup to where we secure the field before we start bringing people out of there. I don't want to tell the Taliban, you don't have a voice in this. We're going to secure the airfield. We're leaving like you want us to do, but we're going to secure the airfield, and we're going to secure the routes of bringing people to the airfield. So he poo-pooed the timeline of execution for a course of action that he approved. Well, with presidents and people haven't been in the military and his staff, Jake Sullivan sitting there playing Nintendo, what they don't understand is if you screw with part of that plan, then you have to go back and fix the whole plan. And that's why McKinsey, when he testified in the Afghan hearings, that's why McKinsey sat there and said, I put this shit in front of them. Well, did they agree to it? You'll have to ask them. He's a professional. He's going to say that. You can plan your ass off, but once you get it to the people who wear hairspray and makeup and sit in D.C., you can screw it up. Putin doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to sell it to anybody. He's the blazing saddle governor. I didn't get a varump out of that guy. And, you better watch your... Look at the way he chewed his intelligence chief today. Chewed the guy's ass on Russian TV. He's a different guy right now. We have to put our shit from our planners in front of politicians. We have to. And that's how we screwed up Afghanistan. We had a timeline to do NEO out of that airfield that was absolutely unobtainable. Unattainable. But it was a brilliant plan. It was absolutely a brilliant plan. It was a great success story.
So I want to wrap this up. What is the? I feel like this is just the call to action for the United States. Like either we put up or we shut up at this point. So what do you feel like needs to be done here? This is your own personal breakdown. I don't care about the politics. I just want to know, you're in charge. What are you doing? What do we need to do to make it where tomorrow is better than yesterday? And I'll end that.
I wake up tomorrow morning and I've replaced Biden and Harris.
Sure.
First thing I do is I'd fire Jake Sullivan. I would probably relieve Austin. I would go back and get a true warrior. I would probably go grab somebody like the Eurocom commander, Danny. I would bring somebody in there, and I would sit down and I'd lay the ground rules. Boys, here's what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move X units into Europe. We're going to stage them in Germany. We're going to stage them far enough away that there is no incidental contact line, like if we put them in Poland. But we're going to push some assets in there. And we're going to continue to say to the Russians, if you take the Ukraine, you're stuck in a guerrilla war you had to leave Afghanistan, you're stuck in Syria, and by God, you will be stuck in the Ukraine. And in the meantime, I'm going to bring garrisons back to strength that they were during, the Cold War. Because then I don't get beat to the punchline if somebody tries to do something. That's me. That's how I get up with this. I quit talking about what Putin's saying, and I talk to Putin. I talked to Putin 4 times a day. Well, sir, can you tell us what was said? No, I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. but I can tell you we're talking several times a day. And you probably don't want to be in the room when we're talking. The DC is all about November of 2022. That's what it's all about right now. Don't screw this. We can't afford another Afghanistan. We'll lose the House. We'll lose the Senate. We'll get slaughtered in 2024 and lose the White House. If that's what's driving their boat, boy, we're in serious trouble.
So, I've got one more question that I need to follow up with. Let's say the Russians go bonsai. What loss does the United States actually take? This is the hyper-nationalist in me actually asking this. Because I don't know if NATO's really worth it, personally. Because I think that a lot of people did a lot of good in putting a lot of work into NATO, but it's been squandered. It's been wasted. And now you want to tell American soldiers to fight for the security of Eastern Europe while using Russian energy from the Russians? I gotta kind of go down that field myself. What is in it for us outside of just a lot of blood and treasure lost?
Yeah, what's the upside? It's a great question. What's the upside for the United States? What's the upside for the guy that lives in Wichita, Kansas?
Wait, I'm confused. I've been told for the past 10 years that all we've been doing is fighting for Israel. Did I miss something?
That might be it. That might be what's driving this whole thing.
Oh my god!
Fuck.
All right.
Yep.
No, it means
this may be Netanyahu's plan.
Actually, I wouldn't put it past him. Fucking sneaky shit.
That being said, he's out of power now, so good job. I do really have. I do really have the question here. Is that and Colonel, because you serve with people from all these different nations, you were in the commands. What is the outside of power and prestige and influence in this general region? What does America actually have to either stabilize or gain out of this, outside of just being there? Because we already know it's expensive as hell to run all this shit. We could literally pull back to the United States, and if we didn't change our defense budget at all, we could have a lot better toys. That's a lot more money that we don't need to be spending. So, a lot of different conversation. We can help. We can redo the Navy, all that. But what is to gain with being in Eastern Europe outside of my general thing that I've said many times is that I think sooner or later somebody's going to start a major conflict in Europe in which we have to go clean it up. I do feel like that's going to be the end all of this conversation, whether it's 10 or 20 years down the road. So, number one, do you agree with that? Are we going to have to clean up a mess later if we don't stay? And number two is...
If a mess happens, we just can't leave a mess sitting there. Yeah, so there's some level of cleanup because you just can't leave it as a mess. Yeah. You can't. I mean, we didn't walk away after the end of World War II and say, hey, we're out of here. Shit, we rebuilt Europe. We were the economy that rebuilt Europe. So we can't leave them in a mess. But I'll rephrase your question a little different way.
Sure.
What is the primary task and purpose of the German military?
They don't have a military.
Well, yeah, whatever they've got, the Home Guard or the Walmart security, whatever the hell they have. Their primary purpose is Germany. Do the Germans go spill German blood for Poland? Do the Germans go spill German blood for Lithuania, Latvia? So this issue of who's in this fight, we're in lockstep. Biden says we're in lockstep. We're in lockstep. You hear it 15 times a day. That and the stupid phrase playbook. Oh, they're in their playbook. Shut up. It's called a plan. It's not a playbook. What do the Germans do? What do the French do? Do the French spill French blood to defend Germany? Just how much of a self-economic made bullshit lie is the EU and NATO?
I mean, I'm going with it's not a thing anymore. Or like NATO maybe back in the 80s, back in the 70s maybe would have came together. I mean, that's a different story. I do question maybe the Germans show up to Poland if Poland's actually invaded because it reminds them too much of history as it was. But there's just a lot of questions there that I have answers for. Let's be real, Macron preemptively surrendered.
I love the comment the other day on my stream where somebody said the French must be shopping online because Amazon's out of white flags. Now, I get it. I thought the EU was a bullshit story when it first stood up. When in the 80s, when it was all the ideology, I thought, what a crock of shit. I was in Germany. What a crock of shit. I used to talk to the Danes when I was in doing Oxbow in Denmark. You know who now our primary problem was Spetsnaz at that point in time. For the location we were and what was going to go on there, we knew that this was a tier 1 target for Spetsnaz pre-war operations for the war in Europe. Mm-hmm. Every single time I'd sit down with the Danes, get 2 or 3 Tuborgs at all of us, get to about 2 o'clock in the morning and say, do you guys really think for a minute before a bunch of us could get there from the States that you could keep this place if Spetsnaz shows up? And he goes, almost every one of them. My counterpart, a guy named Toft, he would say, I don't give a shit about Spetsnaz. I'm not scared of them. It's the Germans. Now we're talking 1987, 88. And the universal statement from the Danes was, Germany scares them a hell of a lot more than the Russians do. There are not bunkers built along the coastline of the North Sea in Denmark that the Russians spent 200,000 Danish lives building. The Germans did. I couldn't even get certain members of the Danish Defense Force to come down. We had to have a meeting at a Luftwaffe base in the northern Germany. They wouldn't go. And this was the height of the Cold War, and they wouldn't go. Where are they now? Where do we really think this alliance stands? Do we haul ass over there, then find out we're on our own? I don't know. There's no easy answers here, and we can hypothesize till the cows come home, but
sure,
unless we follow Samantha's theory and just the best way to do it, surprise the shit out of them.
I just kind of want to see the. I'm trying to wrap this up. I know, but it's I just love talking to you. I'm quite curious of what you think is actually going to happen, and if you're trying to be like, oh, I don't know what's in Biden's head, probably nothing. So what does an empty head look like? Are we literally going to go storm in and then find out we're alone, or is it one of those deals where we're going to play it safe, and then the moment that we see Russian forces in Kiev, it's like, hey, we're just going to stay right here. I can't tell.
It's a lot safer in Romania than it is to be anywhere else. I mean, that's a safe bet. I don't know. I saw a very, very different Putin, and I officially and unofficially have followed this guy. I was tasked to understand him at one point in time for over 20 years. Up until the time I retired, hell, I was working issues to the south of us, Central and South America, and I still had to understand him. That was a much different individual in that speech. That is a bellwether event for them. And how much pressure is he under to make sure his staff is in lockstep with him, like Biden's lockstep? Go back and look at that video today when he chewed his senior spy's ass on Russian TV. That's a different Putin. We need to figure out where the hell we are. And I don't know. I don't know if DC can do it. I don't know if this team can do it. Jake Sullivan is a complete and utter idiot. I mean, there's just the guy. He's just the only guy that's in this crisis right now that's out of his league more than Jake Sullivan is Zelensky. Go back to the comedy stage or something and get the hell out of the way of the Ukrainian warfighters. I don't know. Putin's change of anything, Tiberius, Putin's change is the thing I worry about.
Okay. So there's 1,001 things that me want to ask from there, but I'll largely lead off with this. If there is anything that you haven't been able to say or talk about during this particular episode that you think the American people need to know, however few of them or many of them are going to watch this event or program, now's probably the time to do it because we need to wrap this up.
Get on a level playing field. Get on the same plane as our adversary. Understand how he's thinking. Communicate with him. Understand where we are. We can't go anywhere if we don't understand where the hell we are. And you can only tell the American public the 4 major talking points. Severe economic sanctions. The next move is up to Putin. We stand united. We will defend NATO territory if we have to. Those are 4 talking points that the administration has leaned on for almost over 3 weeks now. We're not on the same plane with this guy. How the hell can we be prepared for whatever he does if we're not on the same plane with him? If you've got people telling the president, here's what we believe Putin thinks, and you've got some little nerd from the Department of Treasury going, sir, I'm, 15 points in the stock market if that happens, sir. No. There comes a point in time where you have to tell all those little strap bangers in the room, get out. Get out. Somebody tell me where the hell we are and what are our options. And I don't want to hear from state. I don't want to hear from commerce. I don't want to hear from transportation. I don't want to hear from Department of Homeland Security. I want everybody in this room to tell me where the hell we are. And then from there, you push back out the door. But this thing, we're a ship at sea with no rudder. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of a over 2-hour special event episode regarding Ukraine with our good friend Colonel Dan, and Samantha Banana came to surprise us during this episode. I do apologize for the audio issues she was having earlier, but she got that fixed. I appreciate that. And I do appreciate the laugh, Samantha. You really did hit it out of the park. So, Dan, I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you spending so much time with me tonight. I always enjoy talking with you. I just didn't have as much to add on this one as you do. You lived it. I only get to observe. So I couldn't thank you enough. If I ever owe you anything, I'm going to say it again. If I ever owe you anything, just let me know. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Geopolitics Tiberius Day featuring Colonel Dan Steiner, excuse me.
Von Steiner.
Thank you. Of the United States... well, it was Army Air Force. I apologize. 32 years for Uncle Sam. I can't remember branch, but yeah, 32 years of Uncle Sam, served all the way up.
Started out Air Force.
Gotcha.
Start out Air Force and then got a little shady about the last 12 years, but yeah, just tag it Air Force, and that keeps everything simple.
That sounds good. All right, yeah. I love this guy. From enlisted to officer, went all the way up to 06, said no to the stars because of politics. Real man. Anyway.
Made staff sergeant twice, by the way, Tiberius. I want to put that in there.
Really?
Made staff sergeant twice in my career. Yeah.
I don't know how you do that, but fantastic. All right.
Well, that's why they're sewn on, because you can have somebody take them off.
You'll have to tell me that story after the show. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll get talking to you later. Have a good one.